with a lot of other pagans about, well, why don't you practice magic like we do in our traditions? Like, we have mysticism in Greek, but it's different than what you would consider magic, because magia and magic are different, totally different things, and it always comes down to language to people. You have to explain to them that words have different meanings depending on where they're used and where they come from. So that's the sort of thing. It's like, that's for them. And it's okay. You're not judging them by keeping their thing to where it needs to be. You're being respectful for not interfering.
Yep. Yep.
Welcome.
To not interfere.
Welcome, Isabelsa. I haven't seen you in a long time. My light is being a little dumb right now. Okay, I think that's fine. I need to get a new lamp. Speaking of lamps, one of the things I actually want to get is those oil lamps. You know, the ones made out of clay with the wick?
Yeah.
They have some reconstructions of those that are Greek-specific, ancient Greek. They're really pretty. One of them has a Zeus head on it. Another one I saw had Apollo. Some of them, they're just one wick. Sometimes they're two. And I've even seen ones with 4 wicks. You could set it in the center of a table and have it lit. And you can light it with olive oil. You don't have to use the typical oils they use in a lot of modern lamps.
No, they found a bunch of those on... I was in Nazareth in Israel, which is mainly Arabs these days.
Oh, yeah.
And Christian tourists, of course.
But
they found a lot of lamps there, and they'll gladly sell you lamps in the gift shops there. They run on oil, but they're probably not even made there. They're just for Christian tourists to go, I got a lamp from Nazareth.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking of just going online and getting a few. They have packs, really simple, just clay lamps with wicks for like, $10, $15 for a couple. It'd be nice to have a few around the house, But they light a long time. You don't need very much oil, and they put out a lot of light.
Yeah, I've seen them.
But I can always go to the 99-cent store and pick up just regular white candles. So.
But a lamp is so fancy.
Yeah, it is, and it really looks good. It really looks good for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, Reuven, when I was in Nazareth, it was interesting to me because I'm like, yeah, this is supposed to be this very historic, biblical scene, and the first thing I saw when I got there was an Arabic guy riding down the street on a Harley Davidson. I didn't even know they had Harley Davidsons in Israel.
Yeah, that is definitely a strange sight, for sure. You almost expect everybody to ride around on horses,
Camels.
Camels, yeah, camels, Arabian horses, and what is it, donkeys or mules?
I think more donkeys than mules.
Yeah, I'm not sure the species that they have in the Levant. So.
Habibi Devasan. So have you guys ever had any Sikhs come in here?
I don't think so.
They are one of my favorite religious groups of people. They just have a lot of light to them. They're very interesting people. If I wasn't Jewish, I'd be a Sikh. I do kind of know of a couple Sikhs. I don't know if they use the internet that much, and I think they might come in, but if I invited him. There's a big American Sikh colony in Arizona somewhere, I think, or is it New Mexico? One of those states. But it's where like this one Sikh guy went to Arizona or New Mexico or wherever it is, because he knew there was a bunch of hippies there, and he could teach them Kundalini yoga. And he noticed all of a sudden a lot of his students would start to come to yoga class in turbans, and then wearing the kara, the bracelet, and then someone would have kirpans, which are the ceremonial daggers. And all of a sudden he just noticed that all these hippies had become Sikhs. And now all those hippie Sikhs have kids that they raised as Sikhs. So there's these fully American, white-bread Sikhs in this this one town in, still can't remember if it's New Mexico or Arizona. I think it's New Mexico. But you'll have like these blonde Sikhs. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed Sikhs. And black Sikhs, too.
I can see it.
Yep, Espanola, that's where it is. Well, there's actually a lot of born African American Sikhs because their parents were converts, so they haven't known anything else. And it's interesting when I go out with my fiance, she's Jewish, but she's black, and and everyone goes, "Ken, you're with a non-Jewish girl." I go, "No, she's Jewish." He's like, "Yeah, well, she converted." No, she didn't convert. She was raised Jewish. Her mom's Jewish, her grandmother's Jewish, her great-grandmother's Jewish.
You can still be
Okay.
open to other people. You know. Go ahead.
Since I switched my microphone, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me.
I can hear you.
It's funny that earlier you said that if you weren't Jewish that you'd be Sikh, because I tell people all the time that if I wasn't pagan I'd be Jewish.
Makes sense. I'm just looking for something, a picture real quick I wanted to show some of you guys. I thought I had it uploaded to Imgur, but I didn't. Alright, cool. Now I do. This picture I'm putting in the sidebar is a picture of my altar.
Your altar is so much more organized than mine.
I'm a stickler for symmetry. That's actually not symmetrical to me. But it had to be structured that way because the deities in the back are my household gods, the ones that I use in common worship. And then in the front, I have Dionysus and my chalice specifically for his mysteries. That's the second half of my tradition is Mystichismus.
So I'm curious about pagan thought in the supernatural. I know that you guys have icons and things to that nature. I don't know if you call them icons or whatever you might call them. But do you believe that they have supernatural abilities, or is this part of a tradition, or?
Um, at least in Greek tradition and many European traditions, that's definitely not the case, and I'd say probably most religions that's not the case. The God does not reside in the statue. It's not an idol in the sense, and I've actually told a few Jewish people this, and many Christians who want to get on my case about it. It's a representation of man's ideal of the gods, their logos, their what they can understand with the mind, what they can understand aesthetically and philosophically, but is not the essence of God. The rituals may seem to reflect that. For instance, in the Aphrodisia, the festival to Aphrodite, and many of the Near Eastern cults to similar deities, the statues were washed and adored. They were often offered rose petals, pomegranates, those sorts of things, similar with Astarte. But you're not literally washing Aphrodite. It's that you're showing love and respect, because I'm sure you're familiar in most Mediterranean cultures, the washing itself was a very loving act, especially washing of the feet and of the head, the forehead, that kind of thing. So it was very common for that to have been done. But dressing of statues was a part of the devotional aspect. It was to get you into the proper mindset of the god, to get in proper mindset and communion with that deity.
Yeah, there's actually a Talmudic story about Abraham, who his father was an idol maker, or they say idol maker, a figurine maker. That's what he did for a living, and he sold them. But one day, his father went out of the house, said, "Hey, watch the shop," and he basically took a hammer to all of the different gods and destroyed them except for the largest one, and he placed the hammer in the god's hand. And then his dad came back and said, "What have you done?" And he goes, "I didn't do it. They did it to themselves." And he goes, "What are you talking about? These things are made of wood and stone. They can't move." And he's like, "Well, why are you selling them as such? You know, why are you telling people that these are like actual embodiments of gods when they can't do anything of themselves?"
Yeah. And it has a lot more to do less with the actual aspect of an idol and more to do with the aspect of like how we look at them. I mean, in most of the northern cultures, people would make their own out of clay, out of wax, out of wood. They would make their own statues. So the idea of it being sort of like a business like that almost seems sort of sacrilegious when you think about it. But you know, there are some beautiful artwork out there, and I actually do like statues, and I like the artwork behind them. But I can definitely I can sympathize with the perspective of early Jews on that aspect, because their culture is built around a much more abstract ideal of deity, not one that's as tangible and as representational as an idol.
Right. Jews, we believe that the divine has no body at all, which actually I would think that some pagans probably don't think that any kind of supernatural thing has a body either, just that they are represented by these. I mean, we still put out busts of famous people that we like, and I mean, without any kind of spiritual connotation to it. You know, like in the old CEO, we have his bust here, or something like that, in the office, and I guess it kind of works that way as well.
Yeah, it's representational. It can to suggest that you can actually represent the gods purely. You can craft the essence of the gods as hubris. It's purely arrogance. It's not the altar itself. It's not the statues you place upon it. It's what you do with it. But you can still appreciate its beauty. You can still appreciate its symmetry. Just don't expect that beauty and that representation is your faith. Your faith is not the statues. It's not even the house that you worship in.
Well, no, it's funny how the Jewish faith, we believe that God has no form and that nothing directly is to be worshipped, but we are not short on representations of this disembodied God. This you know, I have a mezuzah on my doorpost that is filled with scriptures. That is something to remind me of my God. We have the ark that we put the Torah in, and even the Torah itself. Whenever we have synagogue services, they take out the Torah and they walk it around the room and people kiss it. So I can see how it is similar in the fashion of this is a representation of something else. We're not worshiping the Torah. And I have heard of some people who were kind of more unfamiliar with Judaism, and they walked into a synagogue and saw people kissing the Torah scroll, and they're worshiping a Torah scroll. And you go, well, no.
There's even a term for that in comparative religion. It's called bibliolatry instead of idolatry. The worship of books and words. So you know what it is when somebody tries to throw it at you.
Yeah.
I reject the idea of idols being a thing. You could say that they're icons, that they're representations, but to actually suggest that there are people, whole religions that literally worship the statue itself, I think is fallacious.
You think it's kind of like a Toy Story religion?
Yeah, and if you really have anybody doing that, if anything, it's a lesson to be learned. It's a lesson for what happens when a person's faith becomes superstition. The Greeks and the Romans had a term for that. The Romans, they would have called it superstitio. It's an irrational belief in gods. It's not logical. It's not good with virtue and faith and excellence. It's just purely superstition. You're asking the gods to do things for you. You're petitioning them. You're not even supplicating. You're groveling.
Well, I know the rabbinic Jews are not short on superstition, that's for sure. There's actually a tradition that if you cut your fingernails, to be very careful about where the fingernails go, because if a pregnant woman were to step on one, she could have a miscarriage. That is a rabbinic Jewish tradition that is, I think, purely superstition. And I heard some story of a guy who was driving down the street in New York City, clipping his fingernails. One of them flew out the window, and the Hasidim, the Hasidic Jews, pretty much shut down the street and took out brooms and tried to find the fingernail. I was going, really, guys? And they go, well, yeah, because we believe that your impurity is in your fingernails, and that's why rabbinic Jews wash their hands ceremoniously so much. Not with soap or anything like that, but with water and blessings and things like that. Which there is in the Torah. There is something that says to wash your hands before you eat bread, but that was more for the sanctity of the temple.
Yeah.
That wasn't every time you eat bread you need to do this ceremonial washing of your hands, which that's one demarcation from Karaite Jews and rabbinic Jews. We go, come on, guys, that's just silly, and it's in the wrong context.
Yeah, I mean, and where do you draw the line? I mean, hair is pretty dirty. I mean, I wash my hair twice a day and my beard. A goatee, and it can be a dirty, dirty mess. That's why you have to constantly comb your hair, especially if it's very thick, because stuff gets in it, and you have to constantly wash it. That's actually a kind of a sign of pride, and it was that way in many cultures in antiquity. Perfume in your hair was a common practice for both males and females. So, I mean, if it is a source, if nails are a source of uncleanliness, then so is hair, because it's made out of essentially the same thing and has a very similar purpose. You shed hair several times a day without even realizing it.
Yep, and I bite my fingernails.
Just trying to prevent miscarriages, huh?
They're not kosher. They're just fingernails.
I gotcha.
You don't eat them.
I don't know. Tasty fingernails,
Maybe the skin on your fingers when you get too much skin.
A little bit of salt, some paprika,
Human sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. You know it.
Are you guys getting a lot of feedback from my mic, like a lot of extra noise?
Yeah, like you get some...
Like I have the window open.
You had like a police thing go by, like an ambulance or a police car or something?
Yeah, I live by a bunch of hospitals.
Okay, so it was an ambulance most likely. Reuven, oven roasted. It's all about smoking your fingernails, you know that. put them in a smoker, you know, like chips.
A little bit of rosemary, you know.
Don't forget the thyme, you know. Yeah, all this talk of herbs, I think I want to have a steak. I don't know, maybe. Welcome, Holly.
So all this talk of herbs, I just finished making Italian chicken that has herbs all over it, so that'll be fun.
Very good. You know, since obviously not as much, but you're a practitioner of a much smaller faith tradition compared to, say, Christianity or Islam. I'm sure maybe you can sort of appreciate this. I practice a very kind of remote kind of paganism, one that's not as commonly practiced as, say, Wicca or something like that, or even as Asatru, which is Norse heathenry, polytheism. So to find a group that actually physically practices festivals every few months is actually a little tricky. There is a group that exists about 50 miles from me, the opposite direction, closer to Los Angeles. And they're a good group of people. I've known them for quite some time, but I don't really have a lot of opportunity to see them. So a lot of my my practices are more household oriented, and it seems to work out well because one of the most important things to polytheistic tradition is your household, maintaining your household, keeping it pure and protected from outside influence. So fortunately that works out for me, but I don't know what I would have done if I was practicing something that required a much bigger church or temple as a common part of practice.
Well, the Karaite Jews, in the United States at least, and in Israel, are a very tiny minority of Judaism. They are, it's most of them were in Egypt. It was very Egyptian. There was a bunch in Iraq. There's still some in like Crimea and places like that, but other than that, we are the minority of the minority. And still, I make some Orthodox rabbis uncomfortable. But actually, one of my best friends is an Orthodox rabbi, and he goes, "Yeah, your guys' faith is a completely legitimate form of Judaism." And so, yeah, I'm very used to the minority thing. We actually don't have a Karaite shul here in Tulsa, where I live. I'm working on putting one together with a friend of mine, but other than that, we are all alone.
Yeah. So I thought I'd share that with you because what I was familiar with it's definitely a smaller tradition, but there are attempts to make actual gathering places for a lot of these minority traditions. Fortunately, you have a little bit more going for you as far as text and long-standing tradition, but
yes,
it's definitely a struggle.
The Karaites are actually. It's funny, even though the rabbis will say, yeah, don't respect their traditions and things like that. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have the Talmud. They don't have the oral tradition that we have. But the Karaite tradition goes back thousands of years. They were some of the very first codifiers of Scripture and of the Hebrew Bible, anyways. And they were known as being some of the top scribes in their time period. And even, it's funny because a lot of the Orthodox Rabbinic Jews will still use Karaite texts for a lot of their own benefits, but then they'll, they want to have their cake and eat it too a little bit. There's actually a book called Chizuk Amunah, which means faith strengthened, which is the very top leading anti-missionary tract for convincing Jews that Christians have tried to convert, to convincing them that there's no way that Jesus could have been the Jewish Messiah, and it was written by a Lithuanian Karaite in, I think, the 16th century, and they'll still use that though. I go, well, you know that's written by a Karaite, right? Okay.
Whenever I get those kinds of people who want to try to proselytize to me, I always tell them, "Hail Dionysus, the thrice begotten." See how they see them squirm. It's always really nice.
Oh, I just invite the Jehovah's Witness in, ask them if they want to talk about the Bible. Their Hebrew's not too good, but
no, horrible actually.
They're interesting folks, though.
Oh, yeah.
Always pretty nice.
Yeah, pretty nice. Till you do something that freaks them out. I remember years ago I was doing a little study of Gnosticism, and I was looking for how it was similar and different to Greek religion. There's a lot of commonalities, though. Gnosticism is considerably more negativistic than Neoplatonism, which had a more positive view of the demiurgos. But I have, and still I had, and I still have a bunch of books on Gnosticism. And they came to my door, and they were kind of aggressive, really trying to get me to convert or whatever. They must have seen something on my head that said pagan or whatever. So I said, hold on a second. I closed the door. I went into my room, and I grabbed this huge tome called the Gnostic Bible and another huge tome called the Other Bible. And on the front it says Gnostic texts, wisdom texts, Jewish pseudepigraphia, Kabbalah, and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, would you really like to have a conversation with me right now? Their eyes got all big, and they just walked away. It was lovely. Made my day.
I always try and wear them out a little bit.
It's always fun.
Yeah, you might come out with something that kind of looks pagan. I answered the door with a long beard and silocks. They knocked on my door once. It was a Shabbat, and I was wearing my prayer shawl, and I answered the door, and it like, hey guys, what do you need? Oh, we just wanted to talk to you about Jesus. And I go, well, you don't think he's God, do you? Well, no, we don't think he's God. Well, because the Jehovah's Witnesses are some of the few people who don't think that Jesus was God. And I go, yeah, isn't that silly? And they're like, yeah, that is silly. And I always try and find the common ground. Especially with Jehovah's Witnesses. They'll actually listen for a while, but when you can tell somebody is only listening to you before they can find their turn to speak. Yeah. They're not listening for information. They're listening for a gap in the conversation.
It's kind of sad, really. But what are you going to do? It's a free country.
Well, I genuinely ask them questions, though. I go, well, tell me something. You guys only think that 144,000 will be saved. Is that true? I'm like, well, yeah. Why are you here? Didn't you guys trying to be like saving your numbers? Shouldn't it be a secret if it's only 144,000?
Yeah.
I thought the 144,000 were from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. So aren't we all kind of screwed if that's the case?
Speak for yourself, no kidding. No, I don't think that's a correct interpretation.
No, it's not.
And I doubt you do either.
Yeah, no, not really. I really confuse everyone, though, because I eat kosher for the most part. Because for a while I actually did try to convert to Judaism, but yeah, anyways, it's a long story. So yeah, I confuse everyone. It's good fun.
Well, it's not all that strange, really. If you look at Greek and Egyptian tradition, going on particular fasts of particular things would have been a common practice. Not even ones that were official for specific festivals, but personal ones that a person could have chosen as an expression of faith. I know a few people who are devotees of Artemis who do head covering as a sign of respect and modesty. So everyone's a little bit different,
When I get Christian missionaries to my house, it's funny because they go, don't you know that Jesus is the Passover lamb that was sacrificed for the sins of the world? And I go, well, first off, the Bible never says that the Passover lamb was a sin sacrifice, for one. Secondly, that actual when God said to slay a lamb and put its blood on your doorposts. Have you researched the religion of Egypt at that time? The lamb was like a center point in their spirituality.
Yep.
And basically the God of Israel was saying, I want you to give them the middle finger, basically. And actually when the brothers of Joseph went to rescue him from Israel, the Egyptians wouldn't eat with the Jews because they said, we can't eat with them because they eat things that we think are not to be eaten, aka lamb, aka things like that, and or i.e. lamb, anyways. But it's funny because I go, yeah, that Egyptian faith, they had their own dietary restrictions.
And it varied depending on which kingdom, which time period. There were some Egyptians that were actually vegan as a part of extension of their faith. So, lots of variation. History is fun.
Well, you get a better context also for if you wanted to read the Bible and understand it, you have to kind of delve into studying the people that they surround themselves with.
Yep.
And if you don't do that, you don't get a proper context.
Well, it's especially true for me as well with Greek religion. If you're trying to understand Hesiod and what he wrote in the mythology, in the theogony, you have to understand all the cultures that are around him, because Hesiod was one of the poets, and when he wrote the theogony, he was inspired by a lot of other local cultures in the construction of that version of the mythos, which became standard for the convening centuries into the present. So, yeah, it's definitely important to study everything. Never be closed to other understandings of history and other cultures, because they are all intrinsically connected in one way or another.
Yep, I even have friends that they refuse to study Islam, and I go, do you even know how close Islam is to Judaism? Islam actually, in Jewish culture, Muslims are not considered too far outside of the faith, as what they would call an idolater or something like that, because they are also monotheists, but they'll consider Christians to be an idolater, so to speak.
Sure.
Even more so, because they worship this three-headed God type of thing. If there's any Christians in here, feel free to correct me.
No, you're totally right on that. It's interesting though, because even though Islam is considerably more monotheistic, it takes a lot of inspiration from early Gnostic texts. Actually, a lot of their conception of New Testament figures comes from Gnostic texts, and the construction of their religious practice very much is inspired by Neoplatonism. So there's a whole host of things that are going on in Islam that people don't even look at.
I guess that's why I love Plato so much.
That's exactly why.
What are you guys talking about?
We've largely been talking about traditions and how history has a large part in that, and a lot of people take things far too literally. We were talking earlier about idolatry, and that the literal view of gods being representative of the gods themselves, actually being of the essence of the gods, is sort of a misnomer in a lot of traditions. And we were comparing the view of theism within Judaism to earlier forms of polytheism that interacted with Judaism. And that's where we are now. So this is a sort of different conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of bounced around a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about death earlier too, and funerary rites, which was fascinating.
I could probably talk about that all day.
You guys were focusing on like how Judaism interacted with other faiths, or like how Judaism kind of took on aspects of other faiths, like syncretism?
More of its sort of interaction, and actually quite conversely, the way that it separated itself. We were talking. I was mentioning Greek tradition as he was mentioning Jewish tradition, and I mentioned the Canaanites, and he was talking about how a lot of things that are in Jewish texts reflect understanding of the Canaanites and what they were doing. And we talked about, I finally got the word for it, nomos archaeos in Greek tradition, the respect of other people's traditions as being theirs and not to be trounced upon or interfered with. And that's kind of what they were doing in Jewish tradition with certain things that are not specific dietary restrictions, but were more to say, we're Jewish, we don't do what the Canaanites do, we don't do what the Greeks do or the Egyptians do. And a lot of that we've talked about since then has sort of reflected that idea, not only within Jewish tradition, but other traditions existed historically. It was very much there were cultural traditions and less religions as we would consider them in the modern term of like Christianity or Islam.
Well, even when it comes to things like, I'm not exactly sure about the traditions behind a Sabbath day. I know that it was one delineating factor between Jews and other people, that they very much keep a Sabbath day, and circumcision especially. I mean, that's a huge one. But it's very much these are all of the things we do, and a lot of the Jewish traditions actually were, I hate to use the term Protestant, but they were almost formed in opposition to delineate their own heritage and their own people from the surrounding cultures, because they were in a part of the world where that was very much practiced. You know, a lot of polyistic things, and Abraham basically was one of those huge delineating. Okay, well, I'm not going to be a polytheist, even though I was raised that way. I'm going to be this person because he was, called the Hebrew, the one who crossed over, who was somewhere else, the different one.
Definitely. And you can really see it especially in the contemporary traditions of the Middle East and the Mediterranean that surrounded Judea, because they didn't have a sort of weekly setup in that sense of 7 days and the end of that 7 days. Most of the traditions, especially the Greeks, the Phoenicians, and the Egyptians, they followed a lunar solar calendar. It was adjusted with intercalary months to get it back to the solar cycle. But basically, they followed the cycle of the moon. And in each tradition, there were days within each lunar cycle that were sacred, that were specific to each culture.
Yeah, which is interesting enough because the Jews also follow a lunar cycle in deciphering the months. Every new moon is the first day of the new Jewish month. And, I mean, they also do that to determine the Shemitah year, which is the year when every 7 years, whenever farmers in the land of Israel are supposed to let their land go completely fallow and not do anything, not to harvest it or anything. They're supposed to not do it, do any kind of agriculture. And a lot of traditions say one of the reasons why the temple was destroyed is because they weren't keeping the Shemitah year, which was they would be raising up crops when they weren't supposed to. And later on, I've talked to a lot of farmers who go, that actually makes a lot of sense, actually, because you probably shouldn't be, over harvesting the land and doing all that stuff. I mean, look at the Dust Bowl. When you take too much advantage of natural resources, that'll happen.
Actually, sorry, Kevin. I still do that. I'm Kemetic, and every year before High Holy Days, I do the calendar for the whole next year, and our calendar actually starts in August and kind of goes on from there, and every new moon is a new month, and each month is like a deity is in charge of it. Like, there are more festivals towards that deity than any other deity, and there are in the Calgary days and months, and depending on how the lunar calendar falls versus the civil calendar.
Well, yeah, the Karaite Jews are actually one of the few Jewish sects anymore that actually goes outside to spot the new moon. I mean, especially it's supposed to be you spot the new moon in the land of Israel, but nowadays the rabbinic Jews actually have a pre-calculated calendar because they were in exile for so long. They weren't able to spot the new moon in the land of Israel because they weren't there, so they used math and came up with their own calendar. But the Karaites always maintained the tradition of spotting the new moon, actually going outside and looking up into the sky to see it, to determine when the new month starts.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ken. I got a question. Are we using the term new moon differently than we currently use it? Because currently new moon refers to when the moon's not visible.
Yeah, that's a modern concept. I've taken to using the term dark moon to describe that. New moon is the sign of the first crescent. Greek tradition, we call that pneumenia, the sign of the first crescent. And the Egyptian tradition, what Isabel was mentioning, also follows it similarly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the Jewish tradition of the new moon is to actually be able to see the sliver. Call it Grandpa's eyelash.
You could call it my hairline too, for that matter. It would be about the same thing. Sorry.
That's cool.
I'm,
That always made me mad though too, because when I go outside to spot the new moon, I'm just thinking, God, couldn't you like told us to spot the full moon? Because that'd be so much easier. Because I'm staring up into the sky, squinting, and the tradition is you're supposed to do it with the unaided eye. You're not supposed to use, binoculars or telescope or anything like that. So I really have to depend on other people because my sight is pretty much shot.
If I get Isabelsa, did I get it right?
But you can't use any visual aid. Does that mean you can't wear your glasses?
Right, I got to depend on other people actually, or I just squint really hard.
So you're not you can't use your glasses. I was asking that.
Oh, to spot the new moon in in Karaite Jewish tradition, you don't use any kind of way. It's supposed to be, since it was supposed to. We take everything back to the way an ancient Israelite shepherd or farmer would understand it. That back to its very simplest form, and a lot of rabbinic sources will say, well, we can determine this with math and all that, and then we go, well, what about the ancient Israelite shepherd who wasn't, a rocket scientist, who was not an astronomer and couldn't figure out these things? We take it from that context of we got to be able to see it in its simplest form, and there's a lot of Karaite Jewish traditions, which it's funny because it's an extremely academic sect of Judaism, but they are striving to get back to the simplest forms of things, and they work really hard to get simple, which is kind of ironic.
I was going to mention before, just as a point of corollary, Greek tradition is very similar to Egyptian in when the year begins. This year it started in late July. The Panathenea Tamidica, the first festival of the year, it's the 7 days leading up to the first Pneumenia, which was in late July. So it's very interesting. And the intercalary month, I believe it's every 4 years. It might be 5. There's an extra posterion, an extra 12th month at the end of the year.
The only way that we get an intercalary month is if it's, let me see if I can remember correctly. If it's less than 14 days but more than 7 between the Hellenic rising of Sirius and the new moon, as in the sliver of the moon. If it's more than 7 days but less than 14, you have an intercalary month. So your new year doesn't start until the next new moon, if that makes sense. Probably not.
No, it does. Totally does. And they have websites now designed for a lot of that. I know a lot of the groups that I belong to, they actually have Google calendars set up that are moderated, and each of the months are added at the end of the year for the next year.
You guys use Google calendars for religious months too?
Yep.
Yeah, we do too.
I actually do mine all by hand, and then I transfer it onto a Google because I don't trust anyone else to do my own months.
Oh, we have a badass over here.
Watch out, everybody.
Watch out. No, that's cool. That's really cool that you do that.
Well, because I follow Predonistic, which is a lot different than New Kingdom or even Middle Kingdom at that point.
The only reason I use Google Calendar is because I'm not in Israel and I can't spot the moon there, so that's my tradition. I have friends there that I trust.
Okay, I figured it out. I looked at the one of the main sites. It's done in Olympia. It's the Greek year. It's 4-year sets for each Olympiad, and the third year has an extra month added, to which would be the end of our year, but the middle of the Greek year in winter.
So is there tradition of the 13th month?
Yeah, it's usually kind of ominous.
Yep, the Jewish tradition has a 13th month as well. Every once in a while.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, our inter-Calgary month is called Behuti, which is hilarious because he's the god of scribes, but you know, there.
For those playing the home game, Tahuti is Thoth in Roman.
All right, I've got my bingo board out, and I'm playing the home game. So
Thoth. Wait a minute.
Thoth is
So he's a
marked
god
off.
of writing, or well, I guess so. He's a scribe. Okay, that would make sense. Sorry, I'm late to the party.
It's cool. It's cool. You arrived fashionably late, so you should.
I'll embrace that. Sure, why not?
When we get into these conversations about all the different kinds of gods, I slowly realize how unfamiliar I am with just how many there are.
None, right? Sorry.
Well,
Couldn't resist.
get out of here, atheist! You fucker.
You gotta have an atheist in the room. At
I
least.
know, it's totally, yeah.
Hey, atheism is a religion too, right?
No,
Yep. Yes, it is.
it is not.
It totally is, dude.
It is not.
It's got
It
the
has
term
nothing-
theism right there. Go on. I mean, it's atheism.
Oh, it's got the term there. Oh, well.
It's an ism.
Okay.
As far as America is concerned, it's a recognized religion.
Well, yeah, that's sort of odd, isn't it? I don't like that myself. I think that was a case of they got what they asked for and now they're sorry.
Well, I mean, you know, you either get the protections or you don't.
I know, but I think that was that's just
if you want protection of religious rights, then as an atheist, then you should probably call it a religion.
right. Which
you want a lot of the same things, you know.
Yeah. See, that I don't want to. Let's not take us off topic. 'Cause I'm enjoying this. So
I would
get me on a
love this
soapbox here, and
topic.
I won't be quiet.
I didn't know there was a topic.
Okay. Well, then fine.
Yeah, there really isn't one.
I just even as an atheist, I'm very much against what I think a lot of the American atheists, if you will, have done. I mean, from my perspective at least, it's not a religion. It has none of the qualities of virtually any other religion. I think and I think when people try to turn it into a group. By trying to find some common threads that run between the individuals, I think you're asking for trouble because certainly it's possible to find atheists that are Republicans. It's possible to find atheists that are conservative.
Oh, yeah. I will agree that atheism as a classification by its virtue is not a religion because because someone does not believe in God does not mean they automatically fit into this little cubbyhole. But however, I will say that the movement in America that is called atheism is a religion.
I still don't know. We could probably go back and forth, and I suppose there's probably points. You know, to say
it has dogmas. It's the new atheism that I'm talking about that is would be classified by someone being a naturalist in addition to being an atheist, because most of the atheists that are in this movement are also naturalists, and then there's some other caveats that come along with it. It seems like it's the people that fit inside of this cubbyhole, this bubble, and that are in a movement together like a little fucking herd. I see that as a religion.
Yeah, I can see how it could be seen that way. I mean, I do. I guess I'm sort of, I'm trying to stay more on the technical side and say.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you about.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement. Yeah, I think we're in agreement. But Yeah, there are a lot of them out there that I think go way too far. I mean, my fun piece, my fun entertainment on Google Plus usually is I love to find hangouts where where there is a group of atheists who know absolutely nothing about Christianity, which is apparent by their conversation, building a straw man out of it and then tearing it down. So I would always love to go in as the atheist and go, you guys don't have a clue what you're talking about.
Yeah. I enjoy doing that as the non-Christian in the room that's also not an atheist, and then I start fucking with everybody.
Yeah. Well,
but that is usually the best conversation, is when you have a group of atheists that used to be Christians that think that the version of Christianity that they were in was the only form, and the version of Christianity not only that they were in, but didn't fully understand while they were there.
And that they think all religions are Christianity.
Right. Yeah, and every single religion is Christian.
Well, yeah, and I think the underlying thought there across all of those that would argue with is this: there's this concept that seems to have sprung up that somehow when you're an atheist, this makes you smarter, and if you're a theist, this makes you stupid,
or not mentally ill.
Well, right. Which is absurd. I mean, I've met as many stupid atheists as I have smart theists. So,
and I've met the mentally ill on both sides.
Oh God, yeah.
And I'm happy
no pun intended there.
Paganism is populated with a few people of mental illnesses.
Yeah, there are some. But anyway, yeah. So I was just I don't know if any of you guys have read this. It's a book I just read recently, and it actually I really liked it, so I thought I'd share. If I could stick it up there. By an author called her name's Candida Moss. She's a first through third century historian, Yale, Oxford. She's not a slouch by any means. It's called The Myth of Persecution. It's kind of interesting. The beginning few chapters, especially because who was it? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with everybody's name. Kevin, you'd mentioned earlier how you loved history. Because she does the first few chapters, I think a little bit she has an axe to grind, it seems, with the Catholic Church, but afterwards she goes into a lot of really fascinating history about martyrdom and about culture and about how martyrdom was perceived very differently.
Talked to me about this. I remember this.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't bring it up, but yeah, I was trying to remember the name. There was a group she mentions in the book, which is why I was thumbing through it. I cannot remember this. There was a group of Christians early first century that they had a particular name because they favored hanging around statues or on trails is not the right word, but on
your mom.
On routes between cities and so forth, where they would actually attack people and
trade routes.
Yeah, exactly. But they had a particular name, and I can't think. But anyway, but good book. I'm blabbering here. It's getting late.
Christian pirates?
Do they talk about the war on Christmas in there or something?
No, she doesn't talk about that at all. But she goes through. She basically the first couple chapters. She kind of wanders through Fox's Book of Martyrs and looks and picks about 12 or 13 of the more prominent martyrs in Fox's book, and then kind of dissects them as to why she thinks, that at best it's questionable whether they were actually martyrs. But then she gets into more general history, which is actually more interesting. She drags Trajan in. She drags in, the Roman mentality toward Christians, toward religions, toward the state religion, and blah 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 blah. But it was all very good. Anyway,
I know that the Roman mentality toward the state religion, at least in the first through third century, was fairly whatever. What did you learn about their attitude towards Christians?
Well, I think the basic point that she tries to get across, and she makes this distinction, which when I first heard it, I thought this sounded like we're just playing with words here. But later, I think I appreciated it more. She makes a distinction between persecution and prosecution, which kind of sounds trivial. But the point that she makes is that while the Roman Empire did sometimes enact laws that came into conflict with the belief systems of the early Christians, the intent of making the law was not to go after the early Christians. Now, it may have been religious in general nature. More often, it was more about orderliness and doing something to protect the Roman Empire. But it wasn't that they were specifically, except for a few exceptions, but they weren't specifically going after the early Christians. It just so happened that the Christians fell on the wrong side of that law and refused to obey it, and therefore ended up being prosecuted. She said, but her point being, but that's not the same thing as persecution.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can even be argued that the sort of state religion that was, at the top, that was being kind of enacted by Rome, was in conflict with the cultus deorum, Romanorum. It wasn't reflected in the actual religion of the people as much as it was the religion of the aristocracy.
Well, yeah, one of the things I'm not going to do this justice, but one of the things that she was trying to say, too, is when you talked about the Roman, the state religion, people of many religions still participated in Roman state religion. It was more a sign of civil respect to the authority of the state, and in a very real way, a lot of the emperors at that time did not understand the Christian objection to it. For them to object to participating in this was tantamount to saying that, well, are you a good father? Are you a good citizen? Are you a good worker? These are just common things that everybody did. And so the Christians were behaving in a way that was very, very unusual for the time. She even recites one account, which is funny. She gives it more detail, but there was actually one incident where a group of Christians a mob literally went to not the emperor's house, but a Roman governor's house in the middle of the night, demanding to be martyred. They wanted to be martyred, and he basically crawled out of bed and sent them home. Which I thought was kind of fun. But again, she said the concept there too in martyrdom to remember is, we think of martyrs, we think as being something horrific, whereas the early Greeks. And most of the people at that time, martyrdom was seen as a noble way to end one's life. If you didn't have anything else, if you didn't have a lot of money, if you didn't, you weren't going to die in some great, being a martyr was considered a good thing. It wasn't considered a negative thing. So there were actually, it was not uncommon to have bands to be martyred. It wasn't that they wanted to be persecuted. They just wanted to go out with some sense of nobility, and that was the way to do it back then.
Going down with a bang.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. But
anytime I hear Christians talk about martyrdom at the state of Rome, the Jew in me just kind of chuckles sometimes. I mean, by comparison, it's. I go, have you heard the story of how Akiva died? And
it takes not to make a joke. It takes a lot of chutzpah. To talk about chutzpah. It does. I agree. Especially to talk about it in this country. Give me a break.
Well, yeah, Rabbi Akiva, he basically was tied up and basically had all of his skin removed via essentially potato peeler.
Yeah. Until
he hemorrhaged and died, and then I hear a lot of people talk about, the Christians were so persecuted. Until, they made it their religion, even though that really wasn't original Christianity. Even as a Jewish person, I will admit that. But by comparison, it's not trying to go, you were so much more persecuted. But
some people cite the Catholic Church being the head of Rome as part of Christian persecution because they were so adamant on getting rid of the other forms of Christianity.
Well, they definitely hijacked it. I know that.
It's as simplistic as it sounds. That set of dogma won out is basically all that really all it amounts to. We kill everybody else, we win.
Well, that edict that Constantine put out, basically banning all Hebrew forms of worship, and it was actually, I don't know if it was directly guided at Jews as much as it was the Jewish idea in Christianity. That Sabbath was actually forbidden. And to me, I was like, what if I want a day off, man? Just.
I don't think that day offs were banned. That it was.
Specific temple worship, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So much of what the Catholic Church has done in the convenience distanced itself from anything that isn't Christian. The very fact that the Catholic Church made the end of the night, midnight, is so that they would have more day and less night. Really? And that they would distance themselves from a solar-lunar configuration.
Really?
Sort of paganistic kind of idea. Because to them, darkness was being at night was evil. So they made their very little night at the end of the day, and very little night at the beginning of the morning.
I'll tell you what was evil. It was tonight when I watched the last episode of True Blood, and they didn't tell you who got Sookie pregnant. That sucked.
Very evil.
7 years, and that's how they end the series. That's not right.
Your non sequitur pleases me.
So, okay, random thought, because I didn't really think about this before. I run a cemetery. That's what I do for a living.
You do? Really?
Yeah, I do.
That's awesome.
So there's a woman that came in this morning, and she was like, I need to bury my husband in the morning. And I was like, okay. Usually I bury people like in the afternoon or like in the early evening. And she was like, no, it has to be the morning. And I was like, why? And she was like, religious preferences. And I was like, what religion buries in the morning? Like, who the hell does that?
Who was it? Did she say?
No, she won't tell me because she doesn't want like us to make a big deal out of it. But I'm like, okay, well, like I have a Jewish cemetery and a Lutheran cemetery within my religion. Really isn't a big deal to me. I just need to know how to bury you, goddammit.
Just tell
And you put it that way too.
Just tell her which end goes in first. That's all. That's interesting. So
Dirt goes on top.
Isabel, you're gonna have to you'll have to help me with Make My Dream. Because where are you located, Isabel? Are you in the States? Well, Lutheran, so I'm presuming yes. Probably not too many Lutheran seminaries in Israel. So,
There might be one in Germany.
no doubt. But yeah, you got to help me with my my virtual tombstones, my touch screens and ideas and all that. I got to get that going. I've had this
A touchscreen tombstone?
Oh, hey, wait a minute.
Power going to it? You need to have like a solar panel on your
Yes,
on your
no,
tombstone?
well, you don't act. Well, you did when I had this first idea. I had this idea like 20 years ago. At first, I've been sitting on it forever. But yes, right. So basically, I mean, there's a lot of ways to configure it. But imagine a tombstone with a credit card slider on it, with a with a marble or the concrete slides down and exposes a touchscreen panel just to protect it from the elements. And then, but now imagine that. Now all the cottage industries that spring up from this, because now you're going to have little industries that'll help people put together their web pages, put together movies. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if you could go to a tombstone right now and
have like a little mausoleum,
and listen to George Washington and actually have him talk about his culture and how he saw things and look at movies from his time. So imagine this 200 years from now or 500 years from now. And then you're interconnecting tombstones, not only based on relations, but maybe based on what you did during your life or what interest you had. People can go to tombstones and they can then link and connect and see everybody else's. Anyway, you'll get
the history lover in me is getting a boner right now.
You'll get insurance companies that want to add a rider to your life insurance policy to give you bigger screens and better batteries as the technologies improve over the years. This is.
And they're actually going to be, in 500 years, they're going to be like, you remember when they did touch screens?
Yeah, well, that's okay. But, they can, after I'm gone, I don't care. But for
I'm
now.
actually working on that right now. I work at the first chartered cemetery in my state.
Yeah.
And so I have 160 years of paperwork in my office, and I have signatures of pretty much everyone that built the town that I live in. So I'm working on going through, and I have some of their diaries, and I'm having people record their memoirs. And then people that are dying more recently, like I'm having them do it before they pass away. But I'm actually working on that right now. So where like you can put your phone up to it, and you scan, it's sort of like a QR code, but it isn't a QR code. I don't know, it's fucking weird. Anyway, you scan a little doohickamabob, and then it like pops up, and you can like learn about that person or their occupation or like family members.
Well, and everybody always says.
That's probably a better way to do it.
Well, but everybody. Well, before Clayton says what I think he's going to say, a lot of people suggest that they're like, well, forget the tombstone, just make it a virtual, computer on the web. The problem, I think, is that people want to have a physical connection, especially when you're talking about the dead. I think I think it would be much more popular, much more useful if it actually was in the graveyards, and you had to go there and do a touchscreen, as opposed to sitting in your bedroom and just browsing the.
Well, no, it is. She's putting something like a QR code on the tombstone itself.
Well, you could put like little
So
eye
you go-
beacons there
so
and just
you
pick
go
them
there
up as you
and-
walk by. Yeah.
Yeah, you go there and you scan it, and then you find out all this information. And maybe
Yep.
see if
You need to see the video. You need to see all this good stuff. Yeah.
right, rather than actually installing something
Yeah,
inside the
okay.
tombstone itself.
6 1
So
half.
you still have that physical interaction. It's cheaper.
It's cheaper than putting the touchscreens in. Yeah,
Right.
maybe so. I guess I'm trying to replace tombstone rubbings. Now we need something else on the tombstone.
What if you could actually customize it to the point where it's like, oh, and then this thing comes out of the actual stone, and there's laser lights and fog machines and.
Well, I think eventually you get. I think eventually you
And then
get
a
there.
skeleton pops up.
And for the
on
people that are
Halloween.
weirder, for the people that have a webcam put in their coffin, giving everybody the bird, so that they can see that, or people that want to push you on a treasure hunt after they die for their whatever they've acquired during life, they send you with clues to cemetery to cemetery around the world.
I still like the idea of webcam
Geocaching
in
the dead.
the. I like the idea of webcam in the casket for real-time decomposition.
Do you know what? There will be some people for whom that'll be a thing. I don't doubt it for a moment.
I've done disinterments. I can assure you that is not something you want to see.
You never know what people. Now, see, I'm assuming for people that can't afford to be cremated, that's why you've got that mortar and pestle behind you, right? You just mush them up real fine and.
There's like a blender they put them in to get the rest of their cremains.
I prefer the blender.
That's what that's for.
What? Well, you get one of those nice Breville juicers for that.
The blend tech. Will it blend?
There you go.
It's really funny though because we have a Jewish cemetery within our cemetery. It's really strange how that works out, but anyways. And it's really funny because I had an older Jewish guy come in yesterday, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm Jewish. You're gonna put me down in the box. I ain't coming back up." And I was like, "Okay."
Well, I got you. Answer a question for me, right? In my understanding, and if I'm wrong, just that's fine. Correct me. But my understanding is, at least traditionally, that if you're Jewish and you had a tattoo, that you weren't allowed to be buried in a Jewish cemetery.
That's really, really old school. It's not really upheld too much anymore.
Okay.
And as Reuven said, it is horseshit. I think that's just a folk tale that they kind of bring up to kind of try and get nice Jewish kids to not get tattoos.
Well, let's ask the runner of the Jewish cemetery. Is that a thing, or has that been a complaint from some people, or what?
Our cemetery is run by a synagogue, so they're pretty lax on lots of rules. But I know that the Orthodox cemetery that's about an hour away is really weird about rules and whether or not you can be buried. You have to be actually Orthodox and all kinds of crazy shenanigans.
Well, yeah, you don't want to be buried by some kind of crazy doohickey.
Well, I'm thinking if the one you got now is run by a Reformed Jew, I could probably get buried there.
Yeah, and there are atheist Jews. I know a lot of them.
And I'm Lutheran too, or I was, so I'd fit right in there. Just put me right on the borderline. All right, I could watch the gate.
Just have your ass on one side and your head on the other side.
Something like that.
It's really funny because my fiance is Lutheran and Jewish, so it's pretty freaking hilarious.
Lutherish.
A Lutherish? Yeah, that's black Lutherish or red Lutherish? Never mind.
What the
Lutheran.
Lutheran.
I should be buried perpendicular, because I'm not straight.
Wow. There you go.
I can bury you in a circle. How about that?
In the fetal position?
In the fetal position, yeah.
That is how many people were buried, at least in the British pagans were buried.
I'm really surprised that the guys that do I'm sorry, I lost the term. The guys that stuff animals.
Taxidermist.
Thank you. I'm surprised that taxidermists haven't started a cemetery where they just stuff human beings and then just pose them. And
have you ever seen the bodies exhibit?
No.
That's basically what that is.
Yeah, but they're like flayed into pieces, though, too.
Yeah.
I've seen it, and I cannot unsee it.
Yeah. See, that would be kind of cool.
It's pretty amazing, I'll have to admit, but it is
freaky.
Don't eat before you go.
Carlton, just Google it. The bodies exhibit. That's exactly what the bodies exhibit is.
Well, because I'm thinking,
it's a taxidermy graveyard for human beings.
But when you see this, I would like
a
graveyard. What I would do is, you look on Google sometimes, and there are these, especially in Germany, But other places, there are these huge castles that no one can afford to live in anymore because of the taxes and so forth. That you could turn a castle into that, right? Just taxidermy, and it would sell itself. You'd be able to pay taxes just on the tourist dollar.
Well, people do that with the viewings these days. I've seen pictures of people posed on motorcycles, and some grandma was posed in a kitchen with a cigarette in her hand. I mean, people are getting weird with their viewings.
That's true. Well, see, death is a weird. I mean, the idea of death is. I think the idea of death is fascinating. I think in this country, in general, people are too skittish to even talk about it, and of course, then the cemeteries don't really want to go out on a limb to let you do anything weird or unusual either. I don't know why that is.
Just put me on a boat and burn me.
I'm thinking I want something creative. I want something. If I gotta go, yeah, whatever.
I'll put you in a clown outfit.
You can put me in a webcam and in my casket. I don't care. That'd be fun.
The worms go in, the worms go out.
Yeah,
you can't explain that.
Won't allow you to do weird things because of state regulations. Like, in our state, the family's not allowed to be present during a disinterment.
Now, see, I don't get why the state even needs to be involved in that. If the guy that's dead doesn't care.
Their hands are all over cemeteries. Like, okay, for instance, cemetery laws, like, people don't understand that cemeteries have, like, so many laws. For instance, if someone pre-needs, meaning they buy their services ahead of time, I have to put that in a trust, and I can't touch that amount. Like, I can only collect the interest, and interest rates are terrible right now, just in case anyone's not aware. So, literally, like, there are cemeteries, there's another cemetery in town that has, like, over $8 million they can't touch in a fund, and then people are like, oh, why can't you guys touch it? Well, because the state sticks their dirty freaking hands in it.
That's crazy. There was a guy in Georgia. You probably remember this. This was, I think, a couple of years back. He got arrested because he supposedly people were wrapping up relatives to be cremated, and he wasn't cremating them. He just had the bodies literally laying around in shallow graves and stacked out back, what have you.
Yeah, I heard he was just mixing, like, just throwing dust and random ashes in there, just whatever he could find.
I think there was a guy near Lake Lanier in Georgia that was doing that.
Well, I just don't get why the state is involved in that. I mean, what does they get? Normally, the state doesn't get involved in something unless they get something out of it.
Well, safety regulations. If you don't dispose of your dead properly, you're going to have disease. That happened in the medieval time, in the medieval era.
Well, that's fine, right? Okay, so some regulations as far as how deep you got to put them. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I don't get the money thing.
Right, exactly. You're a business. You should be able to do what any other business does with that money. As long as you got.
You would think, but yeah, no, we can't. A lot of they say that it's because people are owning privately the cemetery. The cemetery that I run has been a corporation for 160 years, so whatever. Anyways, but other cemeteries are like opening funds, and then they're like disappearing with the money, and then there's no one to bury the people. Because there's no money allotted to like dig the grave or pay the guys to dig the grave or to do external burial vaults or all kinds of other shit. But I don't understand why we can't touch it. Like, if we can prove that that person is dead and that person pre-needed their shit, I don't understand why we can't touch the main amount, but whatever.
Right. I mean, it's no different than if I go down to my local hardware store and they say, hey, we got some new widget coming out, next month, and I pay them in advance to buy them. They're not restricted as to what they can do with that money as long as they're there for my widget when I show up, And if they're not, then you go find them.
I still don't understand and I've heard this is actually true with mausoleums. How if they're too tightly sealed, they can end up exploding because of all the gases that get,
Yeah, didn't you ever watch oh crap! What's the one with Ziva?
No regulation on that, really?
What's the one with Ziva? The regulation series.
Explode.
Yeah, there was that one episode where they went to the National Cemetery and they were pulling out one of the things in it, or they unsealed or took the screw out, and then the whole door blew out, kind of like explosive gassing.
Yeah.
They have. This is really, really gross, but you'll see sometimes in mausoleums that there are like little holes, like grates. That's so that can escape. Not all of them have it. Like, I know the ones in like New Orleans don't have those. Like the big family mausoleums in Louisiana. But here they have them like you'll see little graded holes, and that's what that's for. People are like, oh, it's so that the rain doesn't that the rain can come out. No, that's not what it's for.
They should just make a law. If they want to make a law, they should just say everybody gets cremated. That's it. Have fun. Get it over and done with.
The Jews might not like that very much.
There's a lot of denominations of Christianity that would be really pissed.
Okay, fine. I'll be nice.
Well, just natural burial. Just put us in a hole. We don't care. It's a hole in the ground. There you go.
Yeah.
I don't know what makes that any more natural than anything else. But okay.
I'm actually being put in a Jewish coffin. I already ordered it from Israel, so that's happening.
Just a pine box with no actual metal screws in it?
It's not like a coffin in the shape of the Star of David or anything, is it? That would be weird. Okay.
No, the Jewish caskets actually they have to be 100% completely biodegradable to where
really?
They don't even have metal screws in them. That's all like
kind of like the Amish, huh? Just build them out of wood pegs and.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of like they build furniture. I'm up for that. That works.
Biodegradable. You can't have metal screws in it. Is it like iron steel doesn't come out of the earth or something like that?
Well, not stainless steel. I guess you couldn't have. Or
basically,
titanium or something.
Yeah, whenever it disintegrates, there should be like nothing left of it.
I mean, there'll be dirt. Arguably, that's something left of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's like that old thing about
I'll be whiny about that, but yeah.
It's like the burial at sea that they do, the coffins, and everybody thinks the Marines are there, shooting their guns to be, a sign of respect. No, they're putting holes in the casket so it sinks. This is the point of shooting it. But death's a strange thing.
No, I even heard a story once of a friend of mine who's an Orthodox rabbi, and he worked in an Orthodox Jewish funeral home, and some guy wanted to be buried. He had become Orthodox later, and his family wasn't Orthodox. And the family said, we're going to buy the best casket for our son. And so they bought like this titanium something casket. I mean, it was some ridiculous metal or something. And in the middle of the night, a bunch of Orthodox people snuck in and started drilling holes in the bottom of this hermetically sealed casket so that dirt could get in there. Because they go, according to our tradition, he has to be able to touch dirt. And actually, in Jewish tradition too, even if you're buried in the States, they usually dump some Israeli dirt in there. So, a little taste of home.
Okay, well, yep. Again, just for the record, guys, when I go, do whatever you want with me. Isabel, you can have my body, okay? That's the only time you're going to get it, but, you can have it.
Donate it to some necrophiliacs.
That's right. Bury it anywhere you like. I'm good with that.
It's really funny because I've started telling people that make me angry, like, I run a cemetery, like, I will dig you a hole and no one will say anything.
Oh, man.
There's actually a guy that took off his clothes and, like, committed murder on his grave. Like, he had, like, pre-purchased all his shit for his grave or whatever. He literally took his clothes off, like, wrote a little suicide note about how, like, he didn't want to live in that, literally just to open the hole up and stick him in it. And put his nice clothes back on him. It's pretty funny.
So, do you in a big cemetery? I'm just curious. Do you really get much vandalism? Not the surface stuff, but you get people trying to dig up coffins to get jewelry and rings and whatever they were buried with.
Not really. We have a lot of bronze theft, or we did. But other than that, not really.
Bronze theft. What's that?
They steal the bronze for scrap metal.
The plaques on the
prices.
Oh, those. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's easier than digging up a body.
Yeah, I suspect it would be easier because you never really know which casket's got anything in it anyway. You buried them, so.
They're not allowed to take the bronze markers, the places that buy scrap metal. But the vases and stuff, they can't do anything about. They're not supposed to take them, but if they can't tell that it's from if someone takes the bronze metal vase and smashes it up and then goes and sells it, then there's nothing they can do.
Or melts the plate.
Melts it down, yeah. That's whatever. Huh.
Actually, I had that happen not so long ago with a really it was 2 foot by 3 foot bronze urn, and it's like 100 years old, and they smashed it up. And they charged them with desecration of a grave because they ran over a grave to get it, theft, possession of stolen property, all kinds of stuff. It's ridiculous.
At least they got him. I don't understand the thought process that goes behind destroying something that old.
No, I don't either, but it's kind of curious. It depends who would bought. If the dead guy bought the vase before he died for his tomb, then can you really charge somebody with possession of stolen goods? I mean, can a dead person own something?
I think that the cemetery owns it at that point, don't they?
Oh, maybe that's true, or the family.
Okay, so when you buy something, at least for our cemetery, it varies from cemetery to cemetery. If you buy something like a headstone or something, then your family owns it. So if you pass away, then that goes down your line of descendancy. So if you have like 2 children, it passes on, like ownership passes on to them. However, if all of your family is dead, it then passes on to the caretakers, which inevitably becomes the cemetery.
Huh. So literally then, after you die, after you bought your headstone and you die and you're buried, your great-grandson, for example, could say, hey, I like that headstone. I'm taking it home. It's still his headstone. Yeah? Okay. Hey, so what are the rules about reusing a site? How long do you have to wait before you dump another body in the same place? Not to be crude.
2 burials can go in a place. And actually, I have a husband and wife that died in the same year. I'm burying the husband Friday, and I buried his wife in June. So.
But I mean, what happens when you obviously have a limited amount of physical space. So after 160 years, I suspect you have to reuse the same locations for non-related people, don't you?
Nope, I still have 20,000 flooded places, and then I have an entire section which hasn't been flooded for graves yet.
Really?
I have almost 100 acres, so.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a big size.
Do you know what standard practice is for when that happens? When you run out of space?
Yeah, like a little town cemetery where they're filled up.
Does it just close down or what?
They just stopped taking new cemetery places, like new spots.
Yeah, but
unless they can procure more land. Like if you can procure more land, like behind us, there's more land behind us that the city owns. So technically, we could go to the city and be like, "Hey, we want to buy that." But if they don't buy new land, then you really can't bury on top of them.
But can't you, after so many years, can't you go back and exhume the body, the coffin, and get rid of it, dispose of it, and then reuse the place?
Not in my state.
Oh, that's weird.
Is it just maintained forever?
Yeah, that seems that seems like a real waste.
Talking about Poltergeist, that's what they did in Poltergeist the movie. It's extremely illegal.
Huh? That's weird. And it's not weird. It just seems that is very anti-business. I mean, right? I mean, especially. I don't mean. Well, no, but I don't mean crude. But like Heart Cemetery is 160 years old, right? It's been a corporation 160 years. In 160 years, you have to imagine that there are plenty of people who were buried there who don't even have any more family. There is nobody that knows or cares about that person that was buried there 100 years ago. It would seem like there should be no reason why you shouldn't be able to go down there, and if there's still a casket, take it out, dispose of it, cremate it, whatever, and then reuse the land. I mean, with 7 billion people on the planet, eventually we're going to run out of space.
Carlton.
Yes, sir.
Carlton, you think 160 years is long enough?
Not well for some. I didn't say for all, but I said for some.
I mean, okay. Well, let me just give you an example. I mean, my family's got a cemetery. Well, they've got a plot.
Okay.
Something like what she would sell to us. That's got it's got my great grandmother in it that died 80 years ago.
Right.
It's got my grandmother in it that died 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's going to have my mother and my father in it. It's got a brother in there that died 20 years ago.
Okay.
So on and so forth. Now, well, I don't have kids, but my brother has kids.
Yeah.
They're going to go and have placed people within that same grave site that they bought out. Well, I mean, we've got like 20 or 30 different sites there ready to put people in, basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, between just with my great grandmother, they've got 80 years worth of time involved in it. And they expect that their grandkids will want to visit and know about where their grandmother was at, and so on and so forth. So 160 years is a very short time.
No, I realize that, and I wasn't implying just because of the length of time, but just that during that time, certainly there must be some people there that have no more family anymore. For example, my parents are dead. I don't have any brothers or sisters. Right? I have my wife. So
when you're gone, you're gone.
Exactly, right? Or even if you have to wait till my wife passes away too, then we're gone. And so, yeah, it would seem like the law shouldn't prohibit. I mean, the cemetery still is a business for everything else that it is. It's still a business. It seemed like they should have some way to reuse the land, especially if they're in a constrained space and there's not this unending, fields that they can purchase and keep adding to.
Here's how I kind of look at it: is somebody paid for that land? It's like, did they pay for a time limit on that land?
No, I agree with Tony on this one. It should be there for as long as it can be.
I'm still waiting for someone to do the math on.
Well, again, I think the same answer would apply. I think as long as you have relations to whom your property passes, then that is the case. But I think when there is no one any longer, then that land does not belong to. It really doesn't matter that someone paid for it. They're not here anymore, any more than it would matter that they bought a car and there's no family anymore or relations. The car just returns to the state. If the artifacts like the headstone and the vase and what have you end up becoming the property of the cemetery owners themselves at some point in time, then it would seem like the land would do the same.
In Italy, I know that there's a certain time limit because there's such a shortage of land.
I'm Googling this. I'm looking this up
now.
Yeah,
and I think like 10 years or something where they have to, take the body out and bury new people in.
It wasn't like Jim Morrison's, his rent was up pretty much lately, I heard, or something like that. And they were going to dig him up to see if he's actually dead.
Yeah, I think this is due to space, especially in certain countries where, where land is very limited.
Yeah, I mean Japan or something like that, where you have lots of people and very small.
I'm still waiting for someone to do the math to see how much time is it going to be until we run out of space, until everywhere is a graveyard.
It's not.
Well, I don't believe in tombstones. Like I want to be buried near a tree or something and just.
For the 7 billion people on the planet, not talking about graveyards, you can fit them in the city of Jacksonville, and everybody have 2 square feet apiece.
Here's if I can read this.
We've got lots of space. Is the point?
Here's one answer to this from Go. It says, in the U.S., rights in burial plots are perpetual. The relatives of the deceased have a perpetual right to visit, maintain a grave and headstone, and to sue to prevent desecration, neglect, or removal of the body. These rights persist even if the property where the grave is located is sold, provided the grave site is dedicated as such or is in an area dedicated as a cemetery. It's possible to abandon a grave and lose these rights, although courts don't always agree on what constitutes abandonment. Some states have changed the rules by statute, permitting easier abandonment of cemeteries. Nevertheless, there is no fixed end to these rights. You can find detailed explanation in Richard Cunningham's Archaeology, Relics, and the Law. But in most of the rest of the world, a perpetual right to a burial plot is rare. And then they go on and some more details here, but kind of interesting.
We have, let me see, as of Friday I'll have 34,789 burials. Nope. 90, because I have 2. And after we run out of space, it's kept for historical value. Like, for instance, I have 8 senators, several people who were on Bleeding Kansas in the Underground Railroad, several creators of the Transcontinental Railroad, yada, yada, yada. So they keep it as a historical learning area, and it becomes kind of a joint effort between something called Freedom Frontiers, which is a Midwest thing, and other educational places.
sometimes that's what you're talking about too. Is it's not just a family that's living there; it's a historical figure that they, people want a spot that they can say they're at. Hey, some generals get it. So how dare you take their headstone and do anything with it?
Whoops.
It just becomes, I think, it becomes a very complicated issue trying to retake out someone's land from them or their burial. It's worse than a house sometimes, even.
Interesting.
Now, let me ask you this, or I'm trying to see your name here, is a Belisa. How much is a lot? One plot.
You're muted, I think, Isabel. Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. It varies from cemetery to cemetery in the city. Our cemetery is $8.45 for a plot, and you can put 2 people in the plot, 1 full body burial and 1 cremains, or 2 cremains. And then I know there's another cemetery in town that's like, I think theirs is 1,700 for a lot. So it depends on where you're at.
Well, wait a minute, that's, okay, you said something that I thought was really weird. Why, I understand the restriction on the full body because of the space of the lot. Why would there be a restriction on cremated remains?
That is a board of directors decision.
Okay.
My cemetery is run by the board of directors, and then I basically follow out whatever the board of directors want. Unless there is a case brought to the cemetery board of directors, the general rule of thumb is 2. But there are cases, like for instance, I had a couple come in who were probably in their 60s or 70s, and they have a mentally disabled child, and she probably won't last very much longer after her parents die. And the board has given directive that I can bury those 3 in a lot together. And I have shortages where a whole family has died from Spanish influenza, and they're in 1 lot, but it has to be approved by the board of directors first.
Oh, okay. There are no restrictions on cremated remains, are there? In other words, like if my wife gets cremated, I can dump the ashes anywhere I like, right?
It varies from state to state.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
I think in Oklahoma you can use it for target practice if you want.
You can take cremated remains and turn them into a diamond.
I know you can do that. There's the one in California. You go on a yacht and they'll do fireworks displays. They'll set up your ashes up with fireworks and explode you in the sky.
Diamond, I'd like it.
That sounds pretty awesome. I could get down with that.
Yeah, and it was pretty cheap recently. I think it was.
Shoot me into the sky.
It's like $4,000. I think it was $4,000. Gets you the rental of the yacht, which 20 people can go out on, or your friends can be out there. It gets you the fireworks, and it gets you the cremation, I believe, as well. So
sweet.
Yeah, that's
Who's offering this? I want to know.
It's called Angel something. Just look up Angel and cremation and yacht, and you'll find it.
Okay.
What about just a full body launched into a large rocket and just blown to pieces? Because
I can see myself going up into the sky as a dead body attached to several rockets.
I'm thinking if they want to see the effect of space on a body, send it. That would be.
So, if they turned David Bowie's remains into a diamond, would it be called a dog diamond or a diamond dog?
Oh, okay. Grumble.
Don't be mad. Don't be mad.
I think there was
Elvis would have to be the king diamond, though. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think there was a recent Marine, like a retired Marine general, just died, and the Coast Guard agreed to let him be buried in a traditional Viking way. So they pushed him out to sea, and they shot flaming arrows at him and let him sink into the Atlantic. I think that's pretty good. And, it was the Coast Guard that said it was alright.
I'm down with the funeral pyre.
Yeah, I also want to be burned.
I'm thinking this is one of the good arguments against the idea of intelligent design is if we were really intelligently designed, we would taste like chicken, so that people could just eat the remains of whoever went.
Jesus Christ!
It's even better than chicken, Carlton. We taste like pork.
We do. We taste like pork.
We taste like pork. Oh, okay. Well, that's nice. A little Cuban sandwich. You make a little,
Maybe some Cuban sandwiches you've had are you?
You never know.
You know what what our host would be if we made him to a sandwich, right?
Who's our host? I don't know who our host is.
Reuven.
Reuben. Yeah. A little sauerkraut, a little mayo, a little.
Reuven the Reuben.
This is a really
the Reuven.
We taste like pork. I'm screwed. I can't.
And he would be kosher.
boy.
Oh God.
Reuven has a cleft hoof.
I'm just. All right.
If he chooses cud.
Don't worry. Yeah, Reuven chooses cud.
Oh well.
I always thought Reuven was a shellfish.
Well, since you're talking about death, there was and you remember the girl a week or so ago, the one that ended her life because she was 29, she had a brain tumor up in Oregon or Washington State. She went up there because they had the
yeah, I heard about that.
Suicide, right? Okay. Well, I always found that very interesting because it's like one of the groups was on Google and they were saying every human being has the right to end their life, right, with dignity. Okay. But the problem with that is it seems a bit hypocritical because they're saying that this is sort of an inalienable right that every human being has, but yet they want to put restrictions on when you can do it. You can only do it if death is already imminent, but you can't legalize it if you just got to 45 and you decided you've done everything you wanted to do and you just want to go out with a bang. Then it's apparently not your right to do that.
Did they arrest the body at that point?
Well, no. It was she moved to the state because it was legal there and she was dying. But,
I know it's illegal to commit suicide, but
in a lot of states,
do they cuff you after you're?
I think they just don't pay your insurance policy is what they do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, kind of SOL there. Which is,
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
You have the right to remain silent. Oh wait, never mind.
Not here. Only if you're going to say something incriminating.
Anything
so
you say can and will be used against you.
Well, that's actually not true either, right? So that's a lie, because they don't necessarily use everything you say against you. If you don't say anything...
It is true on the internet. It is true on the internet.
Oh, on the internet, yeah. You don't even have to say it on the internet. They'll make it up for you.
Anything you say, even if it's a string of 3 words...
What does Reuven say? I support voluntary and non-voluntary euthanasia. Wait a minute. I support voluntary and non-voluntary euthanasia. What? Wait a minute. What's the difference between non-voluntary and involuntary? This is like flammable and inflammable, Reuven.
If you can't make the choice yourself, like you're in a coma.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it from a medical standpoint either, right? I mean, if even though doctors say, first do no harm, well, again, if the person's suffering, then it would seem that an act of mercy is less harm than
net decrease of harm.
What's that?
There is a net decrease of harm.
Yeah. All right, guys.
If you really go with the first do no harm, then you're not sticking with anybody. You really do that.
Well, that's one of the problems, right? Because if you're talking about causing active harm, that's different. But I think you have to include allowing passive harm when you could do something to alleviate it and not doing it. I think that's got to be equally as bad.
Yeah.
For sure.
Or a cure is really painful.
It's late. I got to run, man. You guys have fun. Nice meeting you all. Nice
Bye,
chatting.
Carlton.
Night all.
Night, Craig. It's fun talking to you.
Isabel. Ciao.
Are you serious with
let's talk about how much Carlton sucks.
It is the internet, right? So
yeah,
it's only customary. Nah, he was good tonight. He's been a little disagreeable before, but no, he was good.
No, I love him. Even when I disagree with him, I love him.
Yeah, no, he's generally pretty easygoing, and I think largely because he keeps himself busy with other things. He's not like a lot of the non-theists in here. It's just all they want to do is build strawmans and attack you.
Did building that straw man make you tired, buddy?
A little, yeah.
One.
Very good, very good. So it's gotta irritate you a little bit, Isabel, so when people don't even like look at your name to like, oh, there's an L with an S next to it. There's no I. At least people don't call me Kayvon, because then I have to be black, maybe. I don't know how that would work. Like, you can't really get my name wrong.
For real.
It can be so frustrating, except for I've probably explained how to say my name like a billion times in Interfaith over the years, and every time I meet someone new, I have to explain how to say it. It's not that hard. You add an S. Isabella Sa. It's not that hard. It's not complicated. It's not like my name is Shaniqua or something.
At least it's not my. I had a friend of mine. I had a friend of mine in grade school. Her parents were from Sri Lanka. Her first name is Irandi, pretty simple. Her last name was Tilakaratne. Big, huge, long name. Imagine that in like second grade. If you don't already feel very ethnic, you do after going into a classroom with that name. But she was such a sweet, sweet girl. Like, you could not piss this girl off to save her life. Her family they were all really sweet, very, very nice people. You know, it's hard to pronounce any Slavic name.
As long as no one calls me Bella anymore, that's fine, because God, that infuriates me.
I think we used to just call you Isa, because we couldn't get the rest of it right, so we just call you Isa.
Yeah,
Isa?
the only one that's ever, well, okay, that's not true. Most people used to call me Iz or Isa, but Christopher, or Abram Fox, as everyone else knows him, calls me Bella, but actually he calls me Mia Bella, but everyone else usually calls me Isa.
At least they don't call you Ibiza or Ibiza, because then you'd have to be making really good trance music. There you go. Boom, 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 boom. I got the headphones for it, you know. Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Absolutely. No, I had to drop that joke. I really like electronic music, so can you tell? Anyway, it's good seeing you in here again. Me and Reuven haven't seen you in a long time, so.
Yeah, I'm fighting the hordes. No, I'm getting really bad. Good grief, I can't freaking talk. I'm getting really big back into activism, and teaching my language to others. So that takes up quite a bit of my free time. Plus, I run the cemetery, which oddly takes up quite a bit of free time as well. So.
What dialect is it, by the way? I don't want to mischaracterize it.
It's Vlogsko-Doroshi, or Romani. So it's Vlogsko-Doroshi Romanesque. Yeah, because that's not complicated.
Yeah,
Can you break that down for me in a way that a stupid person can understand?
Okay,
what?
Can you speak
I'm not familiar with you at all.
Can you speak simple?
Can you speak dumb person for me? Because I don't know what the hell you just said. I got no idea.
Okay, so Romani, or Romani gypsies, as most people call us, break down into what's called nastas and vistas. Basically, they're like tribes, to make it easier. Tribes in ethnicity.
Totally understand now. Got it.
So Koldoroshi is my So Vimstarama. Anyways, I'm Koldoroshi, that's my tribe, and Vlox is our dialect, so I speak Vlox Koldoroshi Romanesque.
Got it.
Yeah. I was just gonna say you teaching Romani, but I know there's different dialects, so I didn't want to just say, oh, you're teaching Romani, because that's simple, right?
Well, not really, because we have no written language.
Exactly. You got to be like the Cherokee and make your own alphabet, man. Come on now. You could do it.
Well, okay, that's not true. We have written language, but it's kind of bastardized. So the Hungarians read it differently than the Romanians, and the Romanians read it differently than the Moldovans, read it differently from the Spanish. You know, good fun stuff.
Absolutely. Because Hungarian is not difficult. I'm sorry, I'm being snarky.
It's a quick and dirty language to learn, I guess.
Romani, Romanian, they're so similar sounding.
I want to know why Reuven has a thing that says they call themselves the Roma.
Because he really likes specific, like, he likes ethnic groups that people don't know about. It's like his thing. That's kind of his activism to an extent. He likes, like he was doing a whole thing about the Scottish independence a few months ago, and he was getting people together talking about it. Catalonia, there's another one, yeah. They're going to be doing a thing about that now soon. I actually heard about that at a meetup that I was at the other day.
Wait, Caledonia?
Catalonia.
Wait, say that again?
Catalonia.
It's in Spain.
Catalonia is not Spain.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about something else. All right. Because Caledonia was the old name for Scotland.
Yeah. Stop with your Celt stuff, Clayton.
Yeah.
Come on now.
All right.
It's not like I don't talk about Greek and Roman stuff all the time. Come on.
If Scotland decided to declare its independence and call itself Caledonia, I would shit my pants. I'd probably move there and be okay with it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'd have to figure out the accent though, because the one, like, yeah, it's like I speak the language in Scotland, but I don't understand anybody.
I gotcha.
So, I have that time hop application or whatever where it tells you like what was going on in your newsfeed like however long ago. Apparently 2 years ago is when the Romani activists got turned away from the Holocaust Memorial. So that's good fun. I like posted
shit.
On all my things earlier.
That's not cool.
The Romani have lost their seat to the United Nations Holocaust Remembrance for like, we have it for like 2 years and then we lose it for like 10 and then we have it for like half a year and then we lose it for like another 3.
It's really weird.
Yeah, apparently the Romani Holocaust is different from the Jewish Holocaust.
Oh, it was the same kind of program, wasn't it?
The same time period, the same people. This goddamn Holocaust.
Yeah, it's like the Holocaust it covers a broad spectrum of people. It's a lot of Jews, and the Jews were kind of the main target, but it covered a lot of people. Homosexuals too, if I recall correctly. There are different little symbols for everybody.
Jews, gypsies, and gays. And the homosexuals actually really got the short end of the stick, because after the Holocaust, a lot of people still really didn't care. Like, homosexuals were murdered, and they were continually still the victims of violence throughout non-Nazi Germany.
Well, not to mention the mentally retarded and...
Yeah.
Oh, that was a thing, too? Is it being used as a eugenics thing as well, or I'm not super familiar with the Holocaust?
Yes, it's because we're too smart.
Yeah, Action T4 got the disabled, and well, yeah, there's a nasty story about the gays afterwards. It's like Auschwitz didn't close down until like 62. It kept running as a quote-unquote ordinary prison. And of course, because the gays weren't something blameless like Jews. They were basically just kept in prison. I think at one point they were offered the option of a combination of getting castrated and then getting sent to the USSR. Both imposed. So it was pretty nasty.
Yeah, there was actually a considerable amount of violence towards homosexuals leading up to the Holocaust too. So it was kind of a predictable thing. And the sad part is that while the average person in Germany kind of looked on what was happening to Jews and gypsies as not a great thing, there were a lot of people who really kind of looked the other way because homosexuals were considered lowest of low at least among Catholics and radical Lutherans.
Depends on the Catholic, but yes. And what nation, you know. So, I mean, there was a lot of things going on at the time, but generally I think the sort of consensus is that as unfortunate and horrible as it was really kind of the Germans taking things way too far with groups that people already disliked to begin with, if that makes sense. I mean, even in France, where their views on all the aforementioned peoples were more lax, there were still quite a few French people who didn't like Jewish people. They didn't like gypsies. They didn't like homosexuals. And France could be considered like the opposite of Germany at the time. So I think a lot of times with war, especially when conflict comes to these sorts of things like eugenics and mass slaughter and slavery and stuff like that, I mean, it's really the kind of unfortunate side effect of those wars. And a lot of times the wars have more to do with the same kinds of struggles that war is always about, resources.
Oh, every time I think of France, I think of Nicolas Sarkozy, and I hate Nicolas Sarkozy. For those of you who don't know why I hate Nicolas Sarkozy, let me enlighten you. In 2012, I want to say this, maybe 2010, I'll have to look. Anyways, basically Nicolas Sarkozy paid other countries to take his gypsies off of his hands. So basically he rounded up a whole bunch of gypsies and made a whole bunch of ridiculous ass accusations, burned down gypsy villages, and then paid other countries. Actually, that's not true. He put them on planes with money to pay other countries to take his gypsies.
Didn't the EU fight back against this? Like, wasn't this was a huge deal, wasn't it? I think I remember hearing about this.
Probably because I rant about this quite frequently, so...
No, I mean, I remember them fighting. God, there was a huge court case. I don't know if it went to The Hague or not, but it was about whether or not France could forcibly deport Roma. I remember hearing about this. It was, it was BBC World News. Almost a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah, and it's not any better now. I mean, Nicolas Sarkozy's... Oh, God. I don't know. The new president isn't any better. He's still an asshole and hates all the Roma, but, you know, most of the EU hates the Roma because they refuse to educate the Roma along with their children because, oh, God let gypsies in. Shit. Ugh. It's just frustrating. I feel like if they would take time to educate the Roma in the United European Union with the actual European children, then they wouldn't have these problems. But if you constantly tell another race that they're not good enough, and you basically put all these freaking sanctions on them so that they can't live or work, they're kind of going to become corrupted and do whatever necessary to survive. But who the hell am I to say? You know, I'm just a Romani. But, you know, what the hell
It's happened throughout history. Whenever you have a minority group of people who is considerably different than the core populace, and they conflict, it creates all these sorts of haphazard laws and cultural biases on both sides, which continues to develop and oftentimes degrades as a result. And unfortunately, society doesn't have always a clean transition of progress. A lot of times it's very incremental. It's a sort of staggering effect, like a sort of adolescence. You kind of just gradually go through one step at a time.
I think we're seeing that right now with Europe and Islam.
It's interesting to see a culture like some of the more wayward wandering kind of Roma. This they don't want permanent home, don't want social ID numbers or anything like that. It's interesting to see when a culture is rejected and ostracized for being different and essentially set apart from society, how it becomes even more different. Like there's so many small ethnic groups that act like that. They over, like, we're talking over several centuries, they become even more distinct. And the Romas are an incredible example of that. Some of the wandering Roma that don't try to move between borders and such, it's a strange thing. They don't see themselves as the member of any like one place nation, and the culture is. I just wonder. I wonder. I don't understand why the literacy rate and job application rate among them seems to be really, really low. Like, they seem to want to stick around family and be able to move around a lot. I don't know if that has something to do with it, but I know that a big, huge chunk of it has to do with people just not wanting their children to be around gypsies. I can tell that that's a huge chunk of it, but there seems to be some cultural differences on the side of some of the Roma, and I don't think I fully understand those.
Well, okay, you're gonna have to be more specific because there are cultural differences. There are lots of cultural differences, but the reason that the Roma stick to themselves, and we have a saying, it's called "Ezientia Roma Roma Gaji Gaji," which basically means the Roma stands for the Roma and the Gaji will always fight for themselves. Gaji being not the Roma. So it's been like, I'm Polshrat, which means I'm half. And it's been hounded into me even since I was little, even though I'm half, that if I come out as an activist Roma again, because for a long time I was very big in the Romani activism, and that put a huge target on my back. Because once you set yourself apart, people treat you differently, even people that have known you forever. And so with the Roma, the reason that we don't like identification, the reason that we don't subscribe to these things is because every time the Roma have ever been told, oh, this is going to help you get into the social systems, blah, 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 the benefits, yada, 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 inevitably it helps round us up and kill us. So we don't really, we're like, no, let's not do that. We'll just stay over here and mind their own damn business. But that's where that comes from. And there's a huge fear of identifying yourself as Roma because you're afraid, that you'll be rounded up at night and sent to do God knows what. Play for the Jews as they die in the chambers, or be tested on medically, or beaten to death in prisons, or, I could go down the whole list of crazy shit that the Roma have been suffered through. But that's why we don't do that. And the reason that we kind of stick to ourselves is that we have our own laws. We have the laws of the land that we live in, but the Romani have what's called kris. And kris is kind of like our moral standards, like what's unclean, what's acceptable as far as living and cultural exchanges go, and things like that. So it's a very different culture.
And I think too, because Romani culture is it's not just because it's different than other cultures that it surrounds, and because it's so incredibly mixed, the history is just immense, but because they conflict on such a fundamental level to most of the socialistic cultures that we exist in, that are regimented, there's core nations and things like that, that either through the process itself or through their actual core values, Romani had become an incredibly convenient scapegoat for pretty much anything, more so than probably any other culture, because of that essential difference. We think of many in European cultures or nations that we've moved past this sort of tribalistic stage. If you read a lot of history books, especially older ones, there's this view that society has progressed and become more socialistic, that it's become more regimented, it's become more ordered, more structured, and we sort of feel, I guess culturally, that gypsies, I guess to use that term, are behind that curve, that they have stubbornly rejected what we feel is better. So that's where I think a lot of that sort of I don't know what the term is for it, the marginalization comes from.
So what is Isabel? So what's your opinion on the term gypsy? Because I've heard you say it a couple of times, but I don't know. Because I've heard that it's controversial.
It's very controversial. I don't particularly mind it. I prefer to use Rom because, well, that's what we are. Rom literally means the people. Or Drom, you'll hear Drom and you'll also hear Lom, but those are older generations. But we don't particularly like the phrase gypsy because gypsy comes from the shortened version of Little Egyptian, which I don't necessarily mind because I'm a comedic. But the reason that they're called gypsies is because they were thought to be from Egypt when the migration happened through the southern corridors and then up through the north and back into Europe. That's where gypsy comes from. But if you talk to a Romani that's older and you say gypsy, they will automatically pause you off as a gajo or gaji, depending on the circumstances, and not really open up after that. I don't really get offended, and a lot of my familia doesn't get offended, but you got to be careful with those crazy gypsies.
Of course. I usually only use it in reference to as other non-gypsies are using it to describe Romani. When I'm talking about Romani, I use that term, but I think I use it more in a sort of clinical, historical term for how they've been viewed. But yeah, I try to use it as least as I can to be respectful. Interesting thing though, and kind of getting into a sort of different subject or one that's similar. Egyptians themselves are kind of a mystery. So are a lot of, if you look at ancient Sumeria as an ethnic group, we don't really know where both of those cultures really come from. It's similar with a lot of other cultures in Europe as well, like the Basque. And I started studying a little more of Eastern cultures around the Caucasus, and basically north of India and east of Central Europe. There's just a big question mark in that region and how it's connected to a lot of the cultures that we're familiar with and the histories of the Mediterranean, North Africa. All of these peoples that kind of went and migrated. Like in France, there's actually in Western France, the Teufels were a group of people during the Roman period who were a mixture of Germanic and Indo-Scythian and Sarmatian. They were technically Iranian. So it's really interesting when you get into the history of all these cultures, and even in modern day, there's still a lot of mysteries to be solved.
What about this is maybe the last serious question I would have to ask, but what about the claim that Romani culture has its root in Western India, somewhere in the ancient past? This is something I've heard more than once, and from two different anthropologists, saying that there were linguistic similarities, genetic similarities, and such. So I wanted to know about that.
No, there are a lot of similarities between the root of Romani, because Romani changes, or Romanes, the language of Roma, changes from country to country. And whether you're Ginta, so Spanish Gypsy, whether you're Blocks, Kotarashi, it varies a lot. But there's a lot of Punjab words, so there is a lot of India in it. And if you track our DNA does register back to Western India. Now, you'll get some debate within the Roma community as to whether we're Indian or whether we're not. A lot of the new range thinking Roma don't really care where we're from because we've faced so much persecution and we've been out of India so long that we're no longer Indian. And they have what's called Romastan, which is home is where your heart is. Because a lot of the moving gypsies don't really have like a base home, and so home and cultural is where your family is. But there are a lot of roots and a lot of cultural things that we do take from India. Our language has Punjab in it, and a lot of Punjab base. It also has Latinization, so that's kind of weird. But there are a lot of words that are Punjabi, so there's that.
Now, interesting question, since it definitely seems that as the Romani have moved around, they have in some ways picked up other cultures, other than the Punjabi words that you mentioned and the Latinization. Is there any association that would merit their association with Egyptian? Are there any words, are there any cultural ideas at all that resonate with ancient Egyptian?
Being a Kemetic, I found lots of different things that definitely mesh really well with Kemeticism, and being Romani, and being of that culture. Whether there are any words from there, it's really hard to say, but going through other languages, there's a lot of things that we picked up from a lot of strange places. We have some Russian words, we have okay, this is going to sound really bad, but we have some Pikey, so we have some Irish Celtic descent of words as well. And then we pick up a lot of Slavic, obviously, because a lot of us settled in the Slavic area. So we have quite a bit of that. But there are some, you can definitely tell where we stayed for long amounts of time, so.
Centuries even. So yeah, I really find that it's just fascinating the amount of history that the Romani have picked up in their travels. I think that in centuries from now, people are going to be seeing that more and more, and I hope that your activism will see that. It will bring light to the immense, rich history of your people.
Well, one can hope. There's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of fronts to fight, and we're losing a lot of activists. A lot of our really big activists are getting really old and can't do it anymore, and a lot of the younger people, my generation, are terrified to step up. So, and the fact that I'm a girl probably doesn't help me, but whatever.
Well, go ahead.
No, mine is not important. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, as a kind of final note on what I was saying, as far as social progress and as it pertains to this, technology. Things are so much more easily accessible now to the younger generation. They can look something up on a Google search and find out about ancient history, stuff that was only available in universities up till about 10 years ago. So I really think that level of social change will work from the ground up, and that the older generations that have these views about the Romani will, die off, or at least their views will be less strongly held, and it'll be easier for this progress to kind of move along. One would hope.
Do you think that a character like Eugene Hutz hurts the social position of Romani? An eccentric character like that. There's a couple, but I would say he's the most notable one.
Well, I'd love to say that all publicity is good publicity, but it's not necessarily the case when it comes to Romani. For instance, if I hear, like, a lot of the things that I get living in the Midwest is, oh, you're gypsy, like big fat gypsy wedding. I swear to God, if one more person tells me that, I'm going to slap somebody in the face. But it's...
What about gypsy danger? From Pacific Rim.
What?
Gypsy Danger from Pacific Rim. The giant robot that kicks monster ass.
Apparently,
I heard there was some.
because I have no idea what you're talking about.
I heard this was a little bit of an issue among Romani activists. That there's a, which if you're not familiar with it, then apparently it wasn't as big of a deal as I'd heard. But there was a blockbuster film done recently called Pacific Rim, which has giant robots battling giant monsters. And the hero robot of the film was called Gypsy Danger.
Oh God! All right. Apparently, I have to watch Pacific Rim. I was hoping I wouldn't have to.
Good movie.
God damn it!
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
Well, it was nice to meet all the new people. I'm sorry I wasn't extremely contributing, but I'm gonna get going for now. Because I learned a lot in a very short time, so thank you.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from this too.
Yeah. Add me on Facebook. You can learn and ask questions about the Romani all you want, all day long.
Sure. I am on my phone, so I wouldn't be able to see a link to your Facebook. Is it easy to find you?
Since I'm the only one, yeah, I'm pretty easy.
All right, cool. I will find you if I can. If you want to find me, it might be easier if you're sitting in front of a computer. My name is on Google Plus the same as it is on Facebook.
I just remembered something, Isabel. So there was a band that a friend of mine introduced me to several years ago, and I saw them in concert about a year and a half ago, and they're actually pretty good. It's not necessarily my style of music, but the band's name is Gogol Bordello, and they call themselves Gypsy Punk. The lead singer and many of the members of the band are Romani, or so they say. And the performance was excellent. I saw them nearby here, actually, at a small theater, and they put on a great show.
Yeah, Gogo Bordello is actually the band that Eugene Hoots is in.
He's a really cool dude. I've read a lot of interviews about him, and just his history is absolutely fascinating. He was a Russian gypsy, and he fled. His family fled. From where he was, so during that time period.
Yeah, he's from. They're originally from Russia, but he grew up in Ukraine.
Yeah. He has a thick accent. Oh my God, hearing him in concert is something else. It was a linguistic experiment for sure.
He's got the big mustache and the gold tooth and all that.
Oh yeah, he's a character, like a real.
Sounds like a bottom to me.
Gold chain, chest hair.
He plays on a beat-up acoustic guitar with an amp. It's taped up on the front. It's this beat-up piece of crap, but man, is like he plays really well. And one of the ladies on there is this tiny little. I'm not sure where she's from. She looks Asiatic. I'm not sure, but she's on stage with a giant bass drum, the whole show. It was weird. It was just, and they have I think they had an accordion and a bunch of really strange instruments. They had a fiddler on stage too. It's just this really weird, eclectic mix of different sounds that they were doing. And, I was glad to see it.
If you ever see the movie Everything is Illuminated, which is an actual Jonathan Safran Foer book, I met him a couple of years ago. He's pretty cool too. But that movie is Eugene Hoots is in that as well as one of the main characters.
Have you seen Wrist Cutters: A Love Story?
I don't believe so.
I've seen that.
Weird film.
That movie was fun.
Yes, it was.
I love the hole in the bottom of the car.
Yeah.
So stupid.
Yes, it was.
I loved it.
Well, you enjoyed it regardless. It was so stupid, but it was great. Yeah.
It was such a dumb idea that was pulled off wonderfully well.
Yeah. It was just an interesting look at things too. The sort of idea of this very gray afterlife, more like an underworld, closer to how a lot of old cultures saw stuff, and very few people have addressed that in cinema, even comedically. So I found it really.
It was. It did kind of make me feel like it was a underworld. Did you get that feel as well, or?
Yeah, it's more like in Greek it would be more like the Asphodel Meadows, a great place for people who kind of didn't do very much, who were kind of unexemplary. Tartarus in Greek is more like hell in Norse tradition. It was more of a shadowy place for people who were usually pretty dickish in life. And then there was
the place that where it's just a gray.
the Asphodel Meadows. I'll spell it for you inside chat. There's a tripartite underworld. The Asphodel Meadows is kind of in the center.
Did
the
you,
Elysian Fields is off to the other side, and then Tartarus is down the river of sorrow.
What was the one that was off to the other side?
The Elysium, or the Elysian
Oh,
Fields.
okay. And that's kind of like heaven.
That's heaven. Yeah. That's for and there's also a place in Elysian Fields called the Isle of the Blessed. That's for heroes and members of mysteries, people who were exemplary in life. Some people even believe that if you reincarnated 3 times as a virtuous person, that you would be there eternally. But a lot of times they had this idea that you would fade off, or that it would be only a temporary existence. A lot of cases, depending on the tradition.
Can you Facebook me the names of those? Because I'm on the phone, so I'm not going to be able to see it.
Yeah, sure. I'll pull up your thing again. They actually have an article. They have a real basic article on Wikipedia that gives a rough overview of the Greek underworld. I'll just send you that.
Yeah, that'll be good.
It's a good introduction, and it gives you words. It gives you the names of the various rivers, because it's a whole cosmology. And there's actually some pretty cool images that people have drawn up of it. It's really kind of neat. It looks like an old school map. Those are always good to find. Let me see if I can find it. And I can also send you some other links later that gives more difficult kind of things.
But I want to bounce some ideas off of you. I've got a script lying around that it was very simple. It was like 5 pages. It had to do with the Greek underworld. And I wanted to make it a little bit more complex, but I haven't done the research on the Greek underworld, like basically at all. Maybe I'll toss it to you and see what ideas you can throw back at me if you're interested.
The one thing to remember about the Greek underworld, and similarly many Mediterranean Near East traditions, as well as Northern European traditions, is that the underworld was a land beyond worldly concern. That when you left, that your life leaves you. That you have your memories, you have the essence of what you were, but you are untethered to the world. People that were tethered to the world were called shades, what we would call ghosts. People who were stuck in a very bad, miserable kind of state, similar to a miasma, a negative kind of energy. So generally, though, it was viewed that you would go past the world of the living into the dead. That's why they had the river Styx. You paid the ferryman. That was why they had in some funerary rites, they would place 2 coins on your eyes to pay the ferryman, so that you would transition, so that you wouldn't stay as a shade.
And can you tell me a little bit about the plight of being a shade? Like, what happens when you run into a shade? What's the perspective of the shade himself?
Best way I could describe it to you is looking at Taoism or Shintoism. The way that they address ghosts and hauntings is very similar in Greek religion. Purification, purification, purification. You would try your best to purify the area so that the ghosts would leave.
Okay. Yeah. But from the shade's perspective, if the area is purified, is it then able to cross the river, or does it have to find coins, or what?
That's the hope. And there's a whole sort of tradition beyond that's kind of taboo in Greek, obviously because of their distancing from the magic. The actual word necromantia, comes from the idea of communing with the dead. And usually the Greeks believed, stick to your religious beliefs, your devotion, make your sacrifices, purify yourself and your home, make offerings to the Agathos Daemon, and in the hopes that they will leave and transition into the underworld. Offerings to the dead were also very common. There was very much an ancestor worship element. It's sort of been lost to modern people, but often you would give offerings at the crossroads or during Hecate Stepnon a Hecate's Deipnon, you would give her an offering and ask for that person to leave if you felt they were being haunted by shit.
Okay. Interesting. That could make this script that I'm tossing around. It's been like a year since I've touched it, but I'll play with it a little bit and then toss it your way and see what you think.
It might also be good to look at heathenry, Norse polytheism as well, and what we know of Celtic religion. There's a lot of similarities in how they saw it being connected. Understand that the word chthonic means both earthly and underworldly. There was a sense that the other world was attached to the earth. And in the Greek cosmology, Olympus was at the top, and then the stars and the heavens, and then the earth. And then as you descend below the earth, you eventually get to the underworld, and Tartarus is at the bottom. And below that, you have chaos, that which the whole universe came from. That which is void and of substance. Yeah, it's a really complicated kind of esoteric idea. And different traditions and mystery traditions had different views about what that meant. You also might want to read Plato's Timaeus, because he correlates Hesiod's theogony with Plato's idea and the Neoplatonic idea of emanationism, the idea of the one and the logos, and all the sort of esoteric cosmology. It gives you a real good sense of how the Greeks viewed their relationship to the cosmos.
Got it.
Yeah, I love this
I've
stuff.
got a lot of stuff to poke around with.
A lot. Don't get discouraged. Take a breather, because there's a lot to read.
I don't necessarily mind that. I'm digging into a lot of stuff with Celtic mythology anyway, and Celtic just beliefs in general, what we know of it.
You might also want to study...
I'm familiar with the mountain.
Sorry, go ahead.
Wait, what? I'm at a gas station right now, so I'm saying I'm familiar with the mountain of research that has to be done sometimes.
What also might be of help to you is reading about what we know of Gallo-Roman tradition. The kind of interaction between the Gauls and the Romans, and how Celtic religion reflected the Cultus Deorum, and the Cultus Deorum reflected Celtic religion very heavily. It gives us a lot more understanding.
Yeah, there was a lot of mixing. I've read a little bit about that. But come around when there was a lot of war breaking out between the two, that's when kind of it was a bit of a public propaganda against Celtic religions at that point. That's when Romans start writing records of human sacrifice and so on, which may or may not have been a thing.
I'll also send you a link on your Facebook to an individual I interacted with a while ago, his webpage, Deo Mercurio, and he's in a rare kind of state. There are Gaulish polytheists in Celtic Recon. He's a Gallo-Roman polytheist. He has a lot of information on that. He talks about what Gaulish religion is, their philosophy, and the practices. So I sent that to your Facebook as well.
Yeah, I just saw it pop up.
Yeah. And actually, years ago, when I was still kind of researching, I actually helped a group of Gaulish polytheists start up a huge Facebook group.
Cool.
So there is one on Facebook, Gaulish Polytheistic Constructionist Community, and it's good. It's pretty good size. There's a lot of people in there who not only are practicing that, but they're linguists. Like a lot of them are.
Awesome.
There's Manuel Araujo. He's trying to think here. He's from. He lives in Spain sometimes, but he's actually from what's the nation next to Spain? I'm spacing right now.
Portugal.
Portugal, yeah. I believe he's actually Portuguese, but he's very much into Gaulish as opposed to Celtic Iberian. But he knows a lot, and him and a bunch of other people are doing Gallo-Brythonic reconstructions, the actual language itself. And there's some fascinating stuff on that language. You'll learn.
Apparently, there's a little bit of Gaulish over there.
There is.
Yeah.
And in France. It's very...
Oh, it's all over France. That's kind of what Gaul classically is.
Well, I'm saying there are French people who are doing reconstructions of that.
Oh,
stuff.
yes. Okay. Got it.
And a lot of the writings are in either French, Spanish, or Portuguese. You'll find a lot of stuff on Celtic polytheism is written in those languages. There's also Germans who are doing that as well in Germany. There are a few groups in Germany.
All right, I'm going to take off temporarily. I'm on a road trip, and there's an Arby's that's still open, so I'm going to hit that.
All right, sounds good.
Oh, shoot, there's my thing is beeping. But I will be back as long as the link still works in a little bit. I'll see you guys.
Take care.